Welcome to Camera Ready and Able, the podcast that explores the intersection of media change and personal growth. I'm your host, Barbara Barna Abel, and my calling is to help you tap into your superpowers to thrive on camera and in life, and to make an impact on the world. This episode is brought to you by the phrase on brand, a perpetual hot topic in the Camera Ready and Able universe, which is why I'm so thrilled my guest for this episode, Aliza Licht, is here because she really is the expert on the subject and the author of the book On Brand. Shape your narrative, share your vision, shift their perception, a comprehensive roadmap to building your personal brand. Aliza is an award-winning marketer, best-selling author, podcaster, personal branding expert, and the founder of Leave Your Mark, a multimedia brand and consultancy. She advises businesses and mentors individuals on brand building and career development, and was named one of America's Next Top Mentors by the New York Times and Business Insider's Top 20 Most Innovative Career Coaches. She was also a social media pioneer and one of the first fashion influencers. And I have to tell you, all of your amazing accolades don't begin to even tap into how generous you are, Aliza, and what an exceptional individual. And you shared a tiara full of gems when you were on Camera Ready and Able before, talking about mentoring. So I am ecstatic to have you back, and so really chuffed that you said yes. So welcome.
Oh my God, Barbara, first of all, I love spending time with you in any format, but thank you for the kind words. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, so what is on brand in 2023?
For me or for you? Because we're each different.
No, see, I'm glad you just said that. It's not one size fits all, which is a core value of mine. But what does it mean to be on brand now? Is it changed? Is it still the same?
Well, it's funny. It's a phrase that, I think when you work in marketing, it's a very, it's intrinsic to what you do. When you think about what's on brand for a company, right? But we don't think about it as much for people. And I think in recent years, people have adopted it as something they think about. And what it really means is you have a clear understanding of what you align with. It can be what you visually like, what you want to see on yourself, who you want to spend your time with, where you want to put your energy, what you want to support. There's a lot of different realms to being on brand, but really they all roll up to having a clear sense of what it is that you want to be known for and how to make sure other people see you that way.
I love this quote that you give. In the absence of your story, people will create one for you.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, okay, wow. And, as soon as I read that, I was like, of course that makes sense. And yet I don't think many of us are conscious going into this. So what does that mean? And then functionally, how does that work?
So a lot of people don't put time into shaping their own narrative. So that's one of the reasons why Shape Your Narrative is the first subtitle of this book, because if people are going to wait around for others to recognize their value, that's a mistake. So it goes back to the initial question of what do you want to be known for? And how do you make sure you're positioning yourself, not just online, but in person, right? How you're showing up into a meeting, how you're showing up on email to make sure that other people think of you that way. I mean, we're making an impression in every single thing we do. So why not understand what that impression is?
As you're saying that, Aliza, a functional version of this in the sort of casting media space that I inhabit, and we've talked about this before, is that, even when you're sending an email or pitching or submitting, the power of including your own links, right? Which seems like an obvious thing, but I meant like make it easy for the other person so that they don't go around Googling you.
Well, that's a great bit of advice. And I'll take it a step further. How many people don't leverage the beautiful space of an email signature to deliver who they are on a silver platter? Sent from my iPhone is not helping you make other people understand what it is that you do. So that's a functional way to actually shape your narrative.
That beautifully said. And so taking that one step further, when I'm sharing that thing that you sent to me with colleagues or bosses or clients, if you've given me the opportunity to Google and choose the links I'm going to forward, you've just given me the opportunity to shape your narrative. Because I got to choose your photo. I chose the clip on YouTube or social media, not you. And that in a world where we control so little, your marketing materials are the thing that you control, which is a version of a tangible version of what you're talking about, of shaping your narrative. Correct. The other thing you talk about that I'm really curious is about the value of social capital and why it matters. So if you could first define what social capital is, because I don't know if everybody knows what that is.
Yeah, a lot of people think of it as having to do with social media, but it actually has to do with, you've established a reputation to appear. So like, if you ask me to do something, Barbara, and I do that thing really well, I have now established a certain level of social capital with you, meaning that if you have another opportunity and I was responsive and quick and efficient and delivered like I said I would, you're going to call on me again to do that thing. And the more that you do that and establish your reputation with others, the more that they understand that you are reliable and that you're good to work with. So when we think about social capital, it really is that person good to work with? And certainly in your industry, it's like, is that person difficult? Is that person, I'll never forget in our episode when you were like, do I want to go on a travel show for 13 weeks with that person? Like, that is not building social capital if the reputation, when someone hears your name, is, oh, she's a pain in the ass, forget it. You're you know what, don't even bother. Or that something was due on a certain day and there was a deadline and you just casually ignored a deadline. Those are the kinds of things that can really mess up your social capital. And you can't buy it. You have to earn it.
Wow, that's relationship management on a big level. Gosh, just as you said that, Aliza, like I think about even little things, the power of the referral. Gosh, sometimes it's like, yes, this is this and this, but versus the and a delight, and went the extra mile, or I hired them and I never had to think about it again, or whatever those things are. Wow. Yes.
Right. Or where it's like you're doing someone a favor and listen, we all want to get paid, but sometimes you're going to do someone a favor because it will earn you social capital. And if you do that thing as a favor, that person might recommend you to somebody else. So these are the kinds of exchanges that happen when you're trying to build that social capital.
I want to sit with that for one sec, because that is a big thing in the gig economy. And let's just call it now. We're going to name it the relationship economy.
Ooh, I love that.
And so that comes up a lot because there's often, stretching the metaphor, but, income inequality. There's a disparity there's a power gap or whatever. So let me rephrase this, because what you're tapping into is being able to ask yourself the question and understanding, am I building social capital, which is so important, versus am I just getting exploited, or just like throwing this thing out, or I'm doing the same thing over and over again and not getting anywhere, which happens a lot because of like doing some version of free work for a reason.
Well, in On Brand, I actually tap into Aliza Licht, who is pretty much the most well-known startup coach in the world. And when she was starting her consulting business, her coaching business, people always say, well, how do you get experience when you don't have experience, right? This is how she did it. I mean, she basically said, I will do this thing for you. I will coach you for free. But in exchange, I would like you to give me a testimonial for my website and refer me to your friends. So it's perfectly acceptable to sort of negotiate what the terms of this deal are up front, so that you can feel good about that favor you're doing, knowing that you are getting something in return after.
Oh, that is really good advice. I want to go back to you, because it's a two-parter question, because I'm a big believer in you've identified the what, and that the other thing that you offer all the time, Aliza, is the how. And it's the combination of what and how, because we're always told what we need to do, but very rarely does someone show up and tell us how to do it. And you do this. Thank you. As a really helpful example, I wanted to get a sense of, the ways in which your own brand, Aliza Licht and Leave Your Mark, have stayed the same over the years since you identified how you want to be known, as well as how has it evolved?
Oh, wow. Great questions. So I think, just to make this not sound impossible to people listening, in On Brand, I have these exercises called mental gymnastics. which I love that phrase. And it's like a workbook within the book. So everything that I'm asking you to do, I'm sort of holding your hand along the way. And we chip away at exactly this as we go through the book. So first of all, understanding your own brand guidelines, right? Where does your brand begin? Where does it end? What are the guardrails for yourself? So in the beginning of On Brand, the exercise is really self-reflective with a Venn diagram and thinking about how to connect the dots between the different facets of your work, your interests, maybe what you speak about on social media, and finding that middle center to really get a clear understanding of what you should be speaking about the most or what you maybe aren't and could be. So for me, I was really clear about loving fashion. Obviously, I was in corporate PR my whole life, but I also loved mentorship. And where do those things intersect? So in the book, I am the case study. So I take you through how I thought about my own brand, and especially and most importantly, the rebrand, because I was a corporate PR person who did a job at the same company at Donna Karan for 17 years, and then decided I didn't want to do that anymore. But how do you undo what people think of you? And that is part of understanding where you were, where you want to go, and how to get there. So I connect the dots for people on how to navigate that thought process in the book.
Can you just give us a nugget? This is so great because I've had to do this personally to undo, because my career has transitioned from being, strictly casting when I started my business in 2001 to, transitioning into media coaching, which is now transitioned into media coaching for all, and working so much in, like tech and finance and all these sectors. And depending on where you've known me from, you may or may not care about casting, but it's completely grown. And I'm constantly having to, I've got to shape my narrative and share it and shift perceptions constantly. So I am so a member of the choir as well as, a student, but people listening, this happens all the time. So is there, a top line takeaway as somebody's listening to this?
Yes. So I think it starts with self-reflection, right? And really taking the time to understand how you would describe yourself, what you want to be known for, what you're speaking about, either publicly, on social, how you're showing up on email, and then making sure that's actually happening and how people perceive you. So one of the first exercises is asking your network to take a little quiz, because you may think you're X, Y, and Z, but maybe the people around you are like, no, she's not X, Y, and Z, she's A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. So marrying the self-reflection and the public perception is how you create a strong personal brand. And the steps to get there are really kind of being critical of yourself and really thinking through, am I showing up in the way that I intend to? And then making sure that you're doubling and tripling down on that messaging, because going back to what you said earlier with shaping your narrative, and if you don't do it yourself, other people will fill in that blank for you. It's your responsibility to know how you're coming off. And if you're going to show up to every audition or any meeting and you're going to sort of make the room have no air because you're taking up all of it, that is a reputation that you're going to start to have. And people are going to be like, you know what? We don't really want that person in a room. So really understanding how to put all these pieces together to create really the reputation that you want. And it goes across any medium. And one of the things that I really strongly emphasize in this book is that if you're someone who is not interested in building a social media presence, that's fine. But how you are in real life is still your personal brand. You still have to think about that, right? So no one escapes it. We all have some version of one. It starts with what makes you you.
I love the fact that you say that don't get obsessed with followers, that the world has moved on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But going back to you and how you've had to expand sort of your offering, you've expanded that offering also in part because other sectors have come to you for this coaching because the coaching is universal. So same thing here. It's like personal branding is universal, but each person is going to have their own unique take on it.
So I was going to say, would you, we talked about like how yours has evolved, but it's like, are there any missteps you're willing to admit to?
Well, I mean, first of all, let's just say that, I mean, I don't know, for everyone listening, if you didn't hear my previous episode with Barbara, so I was a corporate PR person. I created an anonymous social media personality called DKNY PR Girl that became very famous. I got a book deal from it. I wrote Leave Your Mark. Then I left the company. And then all of a sudden, I'm not that corporate executive anymore. I don't have those millions of followers. I don't want to do PR. And yes, I have a book and that's great, but I kind of needed to like really rethink, who am I? And you do get insecure and you do have like a little bit of an identity crisis because I spent 17 years relying on the credibility of the company I worked at. And I didn't really think about what my name meant outside of that. So that was a misstep in not thinking about that. So part of what I want to do in On Brand is really teach people that their name and building equity in that, their actual name, not Aliza from DKNY, like not so-and-so from X company, but like your first and last name is what you really have to work on and making that mean something. So really, I think, I left the company and I started consulting and I sucked at it. Like I actually sucked at it. And I did it for 10 months and I ended up writing this article for Forbes, which was titled like, how you know you're not meant to be an entrepreneur. And I basically told everyone, like literally hundreds of thousands of people, that not everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur, but the biggest takeaway here is it is okay to admit that it didn't work. And it didn't work. So I ended up going back in-house, but then since then I've gone in and out of house over and over again. But what remains the same is I needed to stand on my own and build my own brand. And On Brand starts off with that story and all of the tech, whether it's, creating your website or making sure your social media platforms are all aligned. Every aspect of your brand needs to be thoughtful. And you have to put some time into it to think about, are you showing up consistently in every medium and with everyone you meet?
This is a really good reminder, though, that it's nonlinear and it takes time. But I really actually want to circle back, because you gave me an opening here, to what I mentioned at the end of my introduction for this episode, is how generous you are, because this is the part you glossed over. The notion of understanding who you are, being true to who you are. Because what actually got you the book deal and the whole idea of Leave Your Mark was because you didn't, I don't know, you tell us, did you start out on DKNY PR Girl thinking this is actually going to be a mentoring platform? No, but everybody wrote questions. And what did Aliza Licht do that nobody else does? Aliza wrote back and responded to every tweet and DM and started doling out mentoring advice and PR and career. And that's what got your book, and that's your brand. And that is so true to who you are.
Well, thank you for calling that out. And yes, I mean, you are right. I think it was my nature to do that. I think I get that from my dad. My dad was always someone who helped everyone and never really asked for anything in return. So, it was sort of my pleasure to see an easy question. And if I knew the answer, like, why would I not help? And I think a lot of people don't realize how easy it is to just be gracious and just sometimes you might see something on LinkedIn and DM and you're like, well, I don't know this person. Why am I answering? It's like, you know what? If someone's asking you a question, just take 3 seconds and answer it. You'll make someone's day. So yes, I did start putting that energy out into the universe and it came back for sure.
And now here it is. Book
Yes.
number 2. No, but also a movement. And then the other thing we didn't really even discuss, and I've been so honored to have just, a teeny tiny participation in this. Is you have a global mentoring program and you mentor young women around the world. And I was honored to be on one of those calls. It's not like little Aliza, oh, look at me. I mean, you put so much out into the universe, and not just with words, but I mean, actions, and then all the ripple effect of all these amazing people doing their thing is literally incredible. It's like you're lifting boats all over the place.
Well, thank you. I mean, yeah, so Barbara's talking about Leave Your Mark community where I mentor. And listen, it goes back to, again, like I get genuine satisfaction and gratification from paying forward what I know. It's why I have the Leave Your Mark podcast, because I want to dish out as much advice as possible and bring on guests like you who have a really unique point of view in whatever they do, and sort of just keep on pushing that information into the world.
By the way, going back to what you were just talking about a second ago, and if you see something, say something, was is because this is a newish concept to me though, but it's comment marketing. And it's to your point, so it's about parasocial relationships. So if you're in a conversation on LinkedIn or watching something, is to either respond to a question asked, but if even somebody you don't know and you both are in the comments section, yes, those relationships, people will take notice. It doesn't cost you anything.
Absolutely.
And you could make a friend in the process. It's also really great strategy. I've started to learn if you don't like to create your own content, if it's just like not fun or overwhelming, that's a really impactful way to show up and, be part of the conversation.
Yes.
So something we haven't talked about before, but I was just really curious and if you touch on this in the book is just where we are between, conversations of TMI and cancel culture.
This is like my favorite. So I could never tell people how to craft their brand, amplify their brand, and then not tell them how to sustain it. And part of that is crisis communications management, reputation management, and understanding cancel culture. So on brand, I have a secret weapon. Her name is Jane, because she actually needs to stay anonymous. And we really go through PR 101, like what actually happens, when you do build this personal brand, right? Or you do get a role and all of a sudden everybody knows you and you mess up. What happens and what are the steps to take to rectify that? And this is probably one of the most tactical chapters. I hope no one ever has to use it. I hope they read it and they're like, thanks for the FYI, but this is not going to be me, because it is pure torture to have to actually experience, God forbid, like having to deal with crisis comms or cancel culture. But really, the tactics have to be so careful and so thoughtful in the way that you approach an apology, or how you're speaking about what might have happened, or where you're speaking about it. And I take people through sort of the dealing with a reporter 101, which is like understanding what it means to actually speak to a journalist and what it means to be on the record or give information on background, or how saying no comment is actually a comment, right? So all of these things that, like, if you don't work in PR, you wouldn't know, but they are now on brand, because I felt responsible to make sure that if I'm going to help you really make your name mean something, then you better know how to take care of it if something goes south.
Wow, this is a massive public service, because again, in a world where we're all personal brands and many of us are small businesses or solopreneurs. Anyway, my whole point is we're all hustling out there to get on podcasts or do whatever we can to, get quoted, get places. Nobody's stopping to learn what you just said until we have to know it. This is, once again, I've just proved my point, my thesis statement here. Aliza Licht, you're one of the most generous people on the planet.
Thank you.
This is incredible, doing the Lord's work. So let's also talk about the book. So it's thanks.
Have you seen the real one? It's metallic. I don't know if you can tell. It's shiny. It's like a gunmetal. Yeah, the book is, this is the only one I have. I have one. It's really, like I said, it picks up from where Leave Your Mark left off. So if you love Leave Your Mark, which, by the way, if you don't know what Leave Your Mark is, I describe it as The Devil Wears Prada meets career advice, because it's really my fashion journey and it is very Devil Wears Prada, but really explaining how work works. Definitely for like a younger, college age, young professional, right out of school person. This book, baby, this is adulting. This is like you are in your career. You can be right in the beginning, you can be in the middle. I always like to say, and it's so funny, when I was talking to the sales team at my publisher, they were like, well, who's your target demographic? And I'm like, you can literally be an assistant who is like aiming for the stars. You can be someone who's a middle manager who doesn't understand why they're not getting their next promotion. You could be an entrepreneur. You could be someone who wants to be an actor. You could be someone who's a waiter who wants to be an actor and wants to figure out how to actually get your name out there. So there's so many different personas in this book, and I kind of dive into all of them. So this is not just for corporate people. This is not just for entrepreneurs. This is not just for influencers. It's really for anyone who wants to get a clear understanding of what's on brand for them and make sure other people see them that way. So it is shaping how they're known in whatever medium they play in.
Well, speaking of that, full disclosure, yours truly managed to get herself quoted in that book. So could you explain, because I was on your podcast.
Yes, you were.
And I don't know how that became like what you got so excited about, but here we are, and I could not be more excited.
You were an amazing guest on the Leave Your Mark podcast. And what got me excited was this idea of how you can call something an audition, but an audition is also a job interview. An audition is also the same as when you're an entrepreneur pitching investors, right? You are presenting yourself for the first time to a group of people, and you have to show up as your best self. So Barbara, didn't memorize the chapter numbers, but Barbara has a whole section in, where are we? Chapter 7, become a captivating speaker and own the room. And really, Barbara, I think what you said about what you look for in an audition really struck me as universal advice. So similarly to how all of a sudden you find yourself coaching all these sectors outside of like Hollywood, same thing, because the advice is universal.
No, it sure is. And that's how it actually began, was, I don't know, like a Wall Street person that I prepped for media appearances. Next thing I know, I'm getting, founders coming to prep for their Series ABC funding pitches.
Listen, here's another piece of your advice that I'll throw back at you that I put in on brand, which is do what you can control. And what you can control is being delightful in that room. Because even though you're not right, might not be right for that position or whatever it is you're going for, that person will remember you and recommend you for something else. And I think that's great advice. And it's not obvious, because sometimes you think like you're interviewing you're auditioning for something specific and you're really focused on that one thing. But what you should be focused on, which is what you said, is really like the relationship you're making between yourself and whoever it is that is holding that audition or interview. So I think that's great advice. So yes, that is why Barbara is in the book, because I know good advice when I hear it.
That's all I've ever gotten from you is good advice.
Thank you.
You know what? I did want to comment on what you just said, because I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It was unexpected that you would respond to tweets and DMs. What does it say about our culture that it was like extraordinary? And you're like, why? It cost me nothing, and it brings me sort of joy to be helpful. And so it is the same way. I just want to mention that we live, these are unfortunately can be very cynical times.
Yes.
So it's easy to lose sight of the idea of best intentions and thinking good things of people. So we lose sight of the fact that a lot of people really are wonderful, because the news is always full of the people who aren't wonderful. And so it's just a reminder to be surprised how many people are rooting for you, how many people are delighted to meet you, and when you leave the room feeling better than when you entered. How many people will share that information? There are a lot of good people out there.
Yes, it's true. But listen, back then, it was 2009. There was no roadmap for being on social media. Brands, especially in fashion, were not on social media yet. So it was very gut intuitive to me to be helpful. And I think like being helpful is like an underrated superpower, because so many people aren't helpful.
Beautifully said. Well, I want to go back to the part of that you're putting out so much wonderful energy into the world.
Thank you.
And that it's practical advice, and it's dressed up as practical, actionable things, but you are making the world a better place.
Thank you. Well, part of why I wanted to do the Leave Your Mark podcast is because I think so many times when you see super successful people and you hear about their journeys, you're like, oh, that's great, but that'll never be me, right? It's like, it's almost too lofty. It's not your goal necessarily. You really don't understand. Like, they're telling you what they did, but you can't do it anyway. So part of what I feel strongly about is making goals really small and digestible and bite-sized, but also giving tactical advice. And I think one of the things that I'm most proud of in this book on brand is that you cannot go through this book without knowing exactly what you need to be doing. I can't make you do it. I can't make your personal brand for you, but you will end the book and be like, oh my God, I know exactly what I need to do now. Will you have the energy and the sort of dedication that is required to like be consistent with your personal brand, which is really important. So like whatever you decide to do, let's say you're like, you know what, I'm going to really put a lot of effort, let's just say, into Instagram, or you're going to really put a lot of effort into the way you present in an audition or a meeting. Like, just being consistent with whatever levers you're pulling is really the name of the game. You don't have to do everything, but you have to do what you decide to do really well and consistently.
It's so great. And just a reminder, it's just like you personally, and I love that you're your own case study, you have pivoted. You've successfully pivoted. And that to me is phenomenally generous, because anybody listening going, everybody has to. That's the thing that's so hard. And when you're forced to pivot when you didn't want to, and you have to, zig when you want to zag, or whatever anybody says now, that is really hard. These are challenging times, Aliza.
They are challenging times, but like, I also didn't want to write a textbook, right? I think when we are forced to rebrand, or not even forced, but when you decide like, okay, I don't want to be known for that anymore. As DKNY PR girl, which was a long time ago, and the fact that I'm still talking about it today is because no one lets me forget it in a way, right? So when I was anonymous as that character for 2 years, and when the news came out that I was the person behind the Twitter handle, it generated over 230 million media impressions. That's not an easy thing to just wipe off you. So when I was no longer working there and sort of left to my own devices, it is a very uncomfortable feeling to think about, okay, like, what am I rebranding myself as? So part of that journey requires a lot of deep self-reflection. And one of the things that I did to do that is to think like, okay, we all know how to do a lot of things, but what do we like doing? It's a really big difference. And I wrote down every single thing I knew how to do. And then I crossed out all the things I didn't want to do. And then I focused on what was left. And then you have to tell people. If you don't tell people what it is you're trying to do, nobody knows. That's part of the shaping your narrative thing.
It's so obvious, and yet so many of us miss it. Really quick final question, if you're up for answering. Who do you feel in the public eye has done a good job with a public, brand rehab?
Brand rehab. Oh my God.
Or just a redo, who had, who needed to.
I think that it's very easy to fall into the trap of like, who had a scandal and who came out from it. But I don't think that that's really what we should model behavior after. I think I'm trying to think like, this is just an example and maybe not directly, answering your question, but like, look at Scarlett Johansson right now. Like, or Reese Witherspoon's actually a great example. Reese Witherspoon has, yes, she can still act in films, but she has rebranded and built an entire other side of herself through Hello Sunshine and through her sort of female empowerment initiatives, that if she never got another role, she's a mogul in another realm, right? Scarlett Johansson, I was going to say, with her skincare line, like rebranded as, a beauty founder. Now I know none of us need another celebrity skincare line, but the idea is people are multifaceted and it is okay to lean into all of these verticals for people. The question is, will the public give you permission to do that, right? So sometimes when you see someone rebrand into a realm, you're like, that's not a good look for them, or that doesn't make sense for them. Or you, as like a power social sort of devotee of that person, doesn't want to see them in that realm. But at the end of the day, I think people are allowed to show different sides of their personality.
Oh, on that level, I think Selena Gomez has done an amazing job because it's not easy to go from being a teen actor and what that was. Oh yeah. God, I'm going to think about this all day.
Yeah. Or Zendaya. I mean, look what she's been able to do.
Great example.
Yeah.
Great example. Anything I didn't ask that I should have asked?
Oh, you know what is actually a really good tactic? And I go through all of this in the book, but I do think visual identity is really an important tactic, especially for people who are trying to become known for something. So for example, like I always wear red lipstick, right? So having a signature look, or like maybe you're showing up to an audition every time and you have something signature about you that you become memorable for that. I think playing with fashion, playing with beauty to create a visual identity is an underrated, very powerful thing to do.
I love that. Absolutely. Here's a really great practical example of this that I love, that I advise people all the time. And women have a very strong advantage in this over men, is if you're on a panel discussion and to wear a bright pop of color. Because if everybody on that panel, especially in the corporate space, is going to be dressed in navy blue or black.
Yep.
Everybody, which one of these is not like the others?
Yeah.
And really stands out. And so, and then even saying that to men, the choice of a tie or a pocket square or something that's going to give him color. But a woman can wear a red dress, any kind of bright, beautiful jewel tone, anything, all the different ways that we can stand out. And then to your point, still on brand in the sense of being appropriate for the place that we're showing up.
Absolutely.
Oh, I love this. Okay. Thank you so much. I know you have better things to do today.
Oh my God. No, I love hanging out with you. Thank you so much. And thanks for sharing On Brand with your listeners.
Oh, I love it. And I want to thank you for listening to Camera Ready and Able. If you're interested in media coaching for you or your team, please shoot me a note at abelintermedia.com, and be sure to download my free ebook, 12 Tips for Success on Camera. And as always, please be sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already.